Look at that. I say that, and here we go. We have Theo, Jang, and Steven Dykman. Theo on the left, Steven on the right. Steven on Rakdos, Theo on Izzet Phoenix. Dom, talk to me about this matchup. Who were we taking in this matchup?
Yeah, this is a classic Pioneer matchup, and which side you think is favored really is going to determine which of these decks you would want to register yourself in a Pioneer tournament, probably. So I think historically, the idea has been Phoenix is ahead at first, but if Rakdos wants to hard target the matchup, they certainly can with a lot of these good sideboard cards. And there have been times where it really makes sense to do that because Phoenix has been the top dog. There have been other times where Phoenix has really just been nowhere in sight, and then it kind of ebbs and flows back and forth. But by and large, I think you ask either side of this matchup, they're going to feel like they have a pretty solid plan, and that's part of why they felt comfortable registering the deck in the first place.
Yeah, and another big part of this matchup is the number of Shieldreds versus Archfiends. I see that Steven Dykman is working with 2 Shieldred, 1 Archfiend. That dynamic of Lightning Axe not being able to kill Archfiend of the Dross is something that definitely comes up from time to time. But we see here, it looks like Dykman has a turn 2 Kroxa. That's maybe not the 2-drop that you want in this matchup.
Yeah, it's the 2-drop that you want on turn 5, turn 6, when you've both exchanged all your resources and you just want to have the next big play. I think early on, you would rather have something a little bit more aggressive, letting you get this continuous board presence, and just letting Theo discard a Phoenix or something is maybe not where you want to be. Going to get a Fiery Impulse instead. Fairly slow start for both players here, and I think on balance, that's going to favor Theo, giving him time to kind of get his engine in place and fill his graveyard and set up a big turn, but we'll see if Dykman has a good follow-up here on turn 3.
Yeah, looks like we have a Graveyard Trespasser here for Dykman. That one, usually pretty good if there is already a Phoenix in the graveyard. Doesn't look like that's the case right now. And then we have Picklock Prankster here for Theo. And, that's the dream, right? Picklock into Picklock and just keep churning through your deck because you can eventually find those Phoenixes and get towards that Treasure Cruise. But we'll see if Theo has any sort of follow-up here, any sort of threat like a Ledger Shredder. This would be the turn for like Shredder into Cantrip because that also gives you a 2/4 to be able to block that 3/3.
As it turns out, I think Dykman was really hoping that Theo would discard a Phoenix through that Kroxa so that he could eat it with the Trespasser. Theo, of course, very smart player, forward-thinking, gonna be aware of that dynamic too. So there's an interesting back and forth even at the second turn of the game here. So yeah, Theo starting to fill up his graveyard. Nothing quite going on just yet. The Ledger Shredder is an interesting card in the context of this deck because it's a good way to kind of grease the wheels, get things moving, but it does give the Rakdos deck, which has all of these removal spells, an actual good target for those, whereas otherwise you're maybe delaying a Phoenix return, if that. So the Shredder, another card which is a little more high variance, if you like, than it might normally be here.
Right, exactly. See Theo going into the tank here a little bit, trying to figure out what we want to do with our turn. Looks like we're leading with a Fiery Impulse. I saw that. Looks like I also see a Lightning Axe, that Picklock Prankster that we knew about, and we're discarding a Treasure Cruise. That's a show of strength if I've ever seen one, or probably just that's a second Treasure Cruise in the hand.
It just shows something, yeah, and got to figure out what that means. Usually the second cruise, especially if your graveyard is under attack, can be a little redundant. But I think both players can predict the first one is with the advent of Smuggler's Copter, a lot of these Rakdos decks have shifted over to that as your 2-drop vehicle, getting a little bit lower to the ground, pairing that with cards like Inti to be even lower, even more aggressive. But Dykman kind of putting his faith in classic Rakdos midrange still. He likes that recipe from a few months ago, and he sees no reason to change it.
Yeah, Dykman actually sporting 4 copies of Bankbuster and 0 Smuggler's Copters. That's maybe not what we saw in Atlanta a couple weeks ago, but definitely a move towards. I think that maybe that move is maybe a little bit more for the mirror match, I would think, because in kind of more of a grindy game that's going to be lasting a little bit longer, where players are trading off resources, you'd rather have the extra cards, like the actual card advantage from Bankbuster, as opposed to the card filtering from Smuggler's Copter.
Yeah, if you think the two big dogs in this field are the Mirror and Blue Eye Control, both matchups where you have a lot of time to really eke all of the value that you can out of that Bankbuster, then just keeping it simple and not being drawn in by the shiny new thing may actually be a very wise choice. So yeah, we're going to see Dykman just drawing some cards and drawing some more cards and almost outcarding the Phoenix deck and its Treasure Cruises at this stage.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, like, what is the end game here for Steven? Do we just like keep drawing cards and maybe try to get to a spot where we can deploy multiple threats in a turn? Are we trying to maybe go like discard? Okay, discard spell into 4-drop here could be pretty good, as there's is only one copy of Lightning Axe, and maybe that can protect like a Shielded or an Archfiend.
Yeah, I think that's one line he's trying to set up is finding a window to stick these really high impact, more expensive plays, and not give Theo a good window to use his removal spells or to use those to then piggyback into the Treasure Cruise or as the first spell to Return of Phoenix or something like that. And so this Thoughtseize is going to let him pick a hole in Theo's hand. And interestingly, yeah, it goes with the Consider. Like there's a Treasure Cruise right there, but Theo's actually some way off of casting that. At least in any kind of efficient way. And so, Dykman takes the much more efficient card selection spell instead.
Yeah, and then has excuse me, has the duress to follow up to take the cruise as well. So just gonna take all of the cantrips and just leave Theo with a bunch of removal spells. Couple of picklock pranksters. I mean, those can, people laugh about the 1-3 body, but they add up, right? If you play the first one, then the second one, that's an attack for 2. Couple that with the Phoenix, that's an attack for 5. So yeah, looks like Theo's gonna go Shredder into Picklock Prankster to get a little bit of a loot here, can get rid of that Phoenix that we knew about. Although at this point, Theo's thinking, maybe we just keep the Phoenix and hardcast it next turn.
And this is a common use of the Prankster, actually, is as a free second spell, if you like, for your Ledger Shredder, which isn't coming from the hand, so you have more stuff left over to connive away. And so, yeah, we get this trade-off of cards, but now Theo is kind of where he was before, and so just has this 1-3 that just materialized out of nowhere. Turns out, yeah, that choice we mentioned, a little less interesting when Dykman just has the follow-up duress as well, just to get everything that he wants. And that's always a little demoralizing, right? Where your opponent thought seizes you, and they're kind of thinking about it. They point to a card and they're like, no, 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 don't pick your hand up. I'm not done here just yet. And your entire hand just collapses from underneath you.
Speaking of your entire hand collapsing from underneath you, that is a main deck Go Blank, Dom, and that's only a one of. So, Stephen, fortunate to find the main deck copy of Go Blank, and that is going to not only get 2 cards out of Theo's hand, but it's also going to exile the graveyard, which not only means that that Phoenix that Theo discarded last turn is no longer of use, but also the possible top deck treasure cruises, and has the Torch the Tower to exile the Phoenix. Wow, everything is coming up Dykman here.
Yeah, Arclight Phoenix not coming back from the graveyard anytime soon, so getting in there as Snarethopter, but Dykman has the perfect removal spell. Torture Tower, exiling the Phoenix, and that's a really innocuous card that has picked up a lot of steam in Pioneer for this specific use, but also against these other creatures like Croxer, like Cauldron Familiar that come back from the graveyard. Also can finish off Planeswalkers like Teferi against Blue Eye Control, the Wandering Emperor, and just a very solid, flexible card. So that's that goes under the radar a little bit, but you see that one popping up in Pioneer decklists all the time, and it makes sense the more you watch these games.
Yeah, and there's that Croxa that was played on turn 2, finally able to come in here, clear the last card in Theo's hand, and Theo is in top deck mode against an active Croxa. That's never a spot where you want to be. One other thing I want to mention is Theo drew 3 copies of Treasure Cruise early on, which is really unfortunate because that's just less in his deck to be able to top deck towards, and that's probably the best card he could possibly hope for.
Yeah, it's tough to know what Theo can really sit together at this stage because if he's spinning his tires, drawing more cards, that then draw more cards, and trying to find a cruise, well, Dykman has a pretty impressive board at this point. He doesn't have a lot of time to be wasting here, so this is going to be a really tough sell. And that Bankbuster you saw drawing 2 cards, but then also was able to essentially let Croxer attack for 4 on the turn it came back, and now, oh god, he's shielded as well. This is an attack for 10 and a Croxer trigger, so 13 potentially. And yeah, this
Yeah.
is a bloodbath.
Yeah, Theo's going to end up chump blocking the Croxa, but yeah, I mean, Theo's going to take a whole bunch of damage against that active shielded as well. And, like we said, one of Theo's main ways to come back is Cruise, but you can't really cast a Cruise against the active shielded. So Dykman going to go ahead and pick up game number 1 here. Very, very, fortunate to find that one copy of main deck Go Blank. I think, honestly, that might have been the turning point because Theo was set up to maybe get a Phoenix back next turn, had a couple of cards to help cantrip and dig a little bit deeper, but that Go Blank was just so backbreaking.
Yeah, it was a close game, and then the Go Blank showed up, and then it was a runaway. And you look at Dykman's list, the 1 main deck Go Blank and 2 main deck duresses, he knows this is going to be a spell heavy field, if you like, and he really came prepared. So getting paid off for that read. Looking at the sideboards here for these 2 players, so from the Phoenix side, you see some of the classic tools for these grindy matchups, if you like. We've got the Favor of the Mirrorbreaker Crackling Drake package, which there have been these Izzet decks which just embrace that in the main deck over the Phoenixes when the format was in a similar spot to this in the past. But even the dedicated Phoenix decks can pivot to that a lot of the time. Young Pyromancer may be an option as a grindy card where you save that for a turn where you can chain several cantrips together, even if they have the removal spell. You've got a few things left behind there. And then you could consider things like Brotherhood's End if there's a lot of artifact base hate or someone on the other side. And then going over to Dykman's side, his main deck already pretty well configured for this matchup, but even more good tools in the sideboard, 2 more copies of Go Blank, the one on Licensed Hearse, the Torture Tower, and then could mix it up with other removal spells or grindy cards here as he sees fit.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up the one hit Hitsugu consumes all. I don't know if you want to go towards that because the graveyard hate it's on suspend, so to speak. So if you play Hitsugu, then like the graveyard hate comes turn 2. So I'm not 100% sure if Dykman wants to go towards that, especially because you already have 3 copies of Go Blank and the Hearse available to him along with the torch for exiling Phoenixes. So, just maybe an interesting one that could come up. But yeah, I mean, this is, like we said, you definitely said in the beginning that Rakdos is a deck that can beat Phoenix if it wants to. And I think looking at this main deck configuration along with the sideboard, it seems like Dykman definitely wanted to beat Phoenix this weekend.
Definitely. Which there aren't actually that many copies of Phoenix in the room. It is, I think, just Theo, maybe one other. So in that sense, that read did not pay off. I guess we've got Ben Unger on Phoenix too. But a lot of these tools are flexible enough that they can come in elsewhere. So your Go Blanks or whatever, you'll bring those in just as a mind rot, I guess, against Blue Eye Control and the Torture Tower. That's just a good removal spell against everyone. So I think that's the key to success with mid-range decks like this is finding ways to hedge against certain matchups that also have applications elsewhere and don't leave you exposed if that read ends up being wrong.
Right, exactly. Now we see the player sideboarding. I don't know. So we have this little slide that I don't know if we have time to show, but there's a power ranking slide. I don't know if we can maybe get that on your screen. But yeah, we've reached out to we reached out to 6 players who were not competing to have them rank the players in the championship and have kind of like a aggregate rankings and alongside like total match wins and standard and pioneer and all this stuff or total top 8 match wins. So that'd be kind of interesting. Here we go. Theo, Jung, look at this. 8th overall, 5th in Pioneer, 9th in Modern, 4th in Elimination Wins, 9th in Elo Project. Come on, Theo. And then 4th in Pure Rankings. So that's for Theo, the 8th overall. I guess power rankings. And then I don't know if we have the one available for Steven Dykman potentially. See if we can get that up on your screen. And then, yeah, Dykman first overall, kind of not surprising with how, he just crushed the entire season. But first in Pioneer, second in Modern, second in Elimination Wins. That's match wins in top 8, 6th in Elo Project, and then 6th in Peer Rankings. So just kind of a little funny thing here. What do you think about these power rankings, Tom?
Oh, well, these are always fun. I know there's always tier list discourse for tournaments like this, which some people enjoy more than others. The thing about these peer rankings is if you think you're lower than maybe you think you deserve, well, you can say, hey, you're not my peers. You're not even in this tournament. Who cares what you think? If you pretty interesting in themselves. But ultimately, the scoreboard is what counts it, and we're going to see who's going to be rising over the scoreboard over the course of the 2 days. Going to kick this game 2 off here with Duress from Dykman taking Treasure Cruise, seeing a hand of just generic Phoenix stuff, right? We've got a Ledger Shredder, we've got a removal spell, got a Picklock Prankster, and some land. So the Treasure Cruise, I think, an easy take from that hand. But the nice thing about Phoenix is your deck is so redundant. You've got so much of all these different pieces that easy to kind of repair the hand even after the first discard spell. The second one or the third one, maybe not so easy. We'll see if Dykman has those as a follow-up.
Exactly. And Theo's hand is pretty serviceable. He can go turn 2, Picklock Prankster to try and find a 1-mana spell to pair with that Ledger Shredder on turn 3 as a removal spell to be able to maybe clear a Graveyard Trespasser. So we'll have to see, what Theo goes towards here. But, notably, none of those kind of sideboard threats. We talked about the Pyromancers, the Fable of the Mirror Breakers, and the Crackling Drake. So none of that. So, as of right now, Theo's hand, maybe needs to find some sort of, one of those sticky threats because, we would imagine that Steven Dykman probably kept in some number of removal spells for Ledger Shredder as we see a Fatal Push in his hand.
Yeah, that's the interesting dance with sidebonding here, where one of the things you might want to take out as the Rakdos deck is some of these removal spells that don't have that many good targets, but then you do leave yourself exposed to a Ledger Shredder that gets out of control or a Crackling Drake. So knowing exactly what ratio of everything to leave in is the tough part, but Dykman has been playing decks like this consistently for the entire year. This is what he won the first of those two back-to-back events with at the start of the year with just good old Rakdos midrange. So this is very much in his wheelhouse, and I'm sure he's played this matchup and these post-board games dozens of times and knows what he's doing here.
Yeah, I wonder how much Dykman even changed his list from the very first event of the year. But jokes aside, looks like Theo is able to pick up that 1 minute cantrip. Interesting, we chose sleight of hand over consider. I'm not sure there's too much of a difference, but I get if you assume that you're casting it on your main phase to trigger Shredder, maybe the sleight of hand is a little bit better because it gives you access to 2 looks. But you could argue consider maybe wants to dip in a Phoenix, but that's maybe a pretty close decision there for Theo.
Yeah, that's the deep Phoenix science, is knowing the relative merits of all of the different one-mana cantrips in the various situations. And that's what separates the average Phoenix players from the really great Phoenix players, is knowing exactly, like, when you have 2 or 3 different ones in hand, what order you want to sequence them in, and stuff like that, which is it's not exciting, but that kind of detail is important to master if you want to succeed with a deck like this.
Absolutely. And we see a spell discarded here for Shredder to get that up to a 2/4, which is notably very, very important against stuff like Torch the Tower. If we, I mean, I guess we're really far away from bargaining that one. I don't think we want to sacrifice the Bank Buster. But yeah, the 4 toughness could matter, in a longer game. Maybe not so much here. Dykman thinking about, I see a red card, a duress, a go blank, and I think I saw a shieldred earlier. So maybe thinking about firing off duress plus draw a card, or thinking about also go blank here. What would you think you would do from Dykman's side?
I think it's tempting to fire off the Go Blank now if there's a good window, so that a top deck Treasure Cruise or something doesn't potentially ruin your day, but also repeating just to get the Shredder out of there, follow up with the Duress, and yeah, you take maybe the last relevant card from Theo's hand, and if Theo were to draw a cruise right now, it would be scary, but you're leaving him a pretty short window to actually do that.
And I got a glimpse of a Dykman's hand. I actually don't think there's a third land, so the decision's even
Mm.
easier. So that definitely makes it a much easier decision as to whether or not we actually want to fire that go blank off, because we can't. And then able to take a cantrip here from Theo, and Theo really wants to find a cruise this turn. That is the card we are looking for. Definitely going to keep going digging, see if we can find that one. Interesting to note, no Phoenix is currently in the graveyard, so wants to maybe find another prankster or something. Consider here, see if we can find a cruise. Theo's hand. Okay, we did bring in a Fable, and we did draw a Fable, so that is something good for next turn, assuming that there is no additional targeted discard. And looks like Dykman still has not found that third land.
And now you get into the tough decisions of, do you try and make other relevant plays, or do you just dig in desperation for that third land with your Bankbuster? Dykman has to dig and still misses. So after a pretty impressive start from Dykman, Theo now has a long window to recover. Going to try and make the most of that here with the Fable kicking things off. And once the Fable comes down, you're really insulated against future discard spells, because now Theo can just cycle away 2 cards, and then if the top 3 of his deck contains a Crackling Drake or a Treasure Cruise or something, then you have a relevant spell that's really shielded from that. Looks like Dykman missed again. And both players just exchanging a struggle here. They know what the deal is. They know that Theo is being let out of the trap. Well, okay, there is a third land, and there is the Go Blank. So long overdue. Theo's graveyard does get exiled, but Fable is in play. The Goblin is in play. Theo's going to get to see 2 more cards potentially with the Fable, and you have to like Theo's spot here. The ball is now firmly in his court.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the go blank is good here. You kind of have to cast it to be able to make sure that Theo can't dump like a treasure cruise. But against an active Fable, not the best, because Theo doesn't really care about that's not what the game is about right now. The game is about managing these Fables, and the card itself is hard enough to manage, let alone the second copy. And Theo's just going to run away with this game here. Unfortunately for Steven that he did miss a couple of land drops, but with that second Fable, I mean, it seems like it's going to be really, really difficult for Steven to come back here from this.
Yeah, Theo almost has more lands than he would like, but the upshot of that is he can cast whatever he draws. He draws a Phoenix, well, we're just casting that thing. That's a 3/2. We draw a Crackling Drake, that's great. We draw a Hall of Storm Giants, we're just firing that thing up. That's a 7/7 coming at you. So the top of Theo's deck, whatever it is, Theo can really make the most of it here, and we'll see what that will yield for him.
Absolutely. Theo's going to go ahead and flip that Fable the Mirror Breaker, get a trigger off of the other Fable, see if we can, get a look at what Theo drew. Maybe he'll give us he'll show us. I think we're choosing not to discard it. You can't be happy if you're if you're seeing that from Steven Dykman's side. Maybe it could be like a Crackling Drake or something along those lines.
Yeah, Theo. Okay, there's Odawara. Interesting. So just bouncing the Fable token, letting Theo attack with everything here. But when Theo picked up that stack of 4 lands, you got to imagine there was a seeking feeling there from Dykman. This isn't the worst it could have been, but you still kind of hate to see it.
Yeah, and Theo recognizing, Dykman, he knows Dykman's still missing land drops, and I think I like bouncing that token not only to not give Steven the opportunity to trade because you're already so far ahead, but also even if Steven didn't want to trade, that gives him a guaranteed 4th mana source. So just clearing, just getting those options out of the way for Steven, really restricting his resources. We'll see Steven discard 2 Thoughtseizes. Not great against an opponent who's hellbent.
No, those are past their sell by date at this point. And now we know that Dykman has had a big grip of spells for a while. We'll see if those can actually help him get back into it here. If there is an Archfiend or a Shieldred or something on this turn like that, it might need to be something like that, honestly, at this stage, but that would be a good first step.
Yeah, I think when I got a glimpse of his hand earlier, I did see an Archfiend. Oh, and it's the Black Cleave Cliffs. You hate to see it if you're a Steven Dykman fan.
Yeah, this is there are so many good dual lands in Pioneer now. Like for a while, if you were in the allied colors, you had to make do with Game Trail, like the god awful cycle of those lands and so on. Now there are good dual lands, but all of those still have their downsides, and you're seeing the downside of Blackleaf Cliffs very evident right here.
Is that Dom? Are you throwing shade on Port Town? I might have to call the cops.
It's not shade; it's just facts. No one has ever had good things to say about Port Town. I mean, the art's nice, I guess, but that's really as far as it goes.
All right, as we see, well, I don't remember what the black red one is. Maybe we can get that up on the screen. But we have Torch the Tower on Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Oh, Foreboding Ruins. That's what it was. I don't know why I thought of that, Dom, but I see, as soon as I thought about it, it came to my head.
Yeah, I have never put that card in a deck. That would be pretty embarrassing, but I'm sure those who have, that name is on the tip of their tongue.
All right, Theo flipping the Fable. Again, Theo's so far ahead here. Dykman, is able to draw a card with that Reckoner Bankbuster, but just like under the gun at 10 life, facing down 5 power. This is a 2-turn clock. Theo's going to,
Okay.
we're flashing a Brotherhood set. I don't know what we're doing with that. I guess we're blowing up the Bankbuster.
Yeah, and that one's not drawing a card on its way out, so maybe a removal spell here for, I would assume, the Reflection of Kiki Jiki.
Yeah, it could be a Fatal Push because that actually turns on Revolt for Dykman. So it could be something like a Fatal Push, maybe a Stomp to be able to handle that Reflection. Need something like that. We're just going in, getting in the red zone. Dykman's going to go ahead and fall to 5 here. We got something end step. Looks like it is Bitter Triumph. Okay, so that's likely going to take out the Reflection. But now at 5 life, facing down 5 power, Dykman still kind of needs another one of those double spell turns.
Yeah, now that said, Theo is on empty, so if Dykman does have either the 4 drops or even something like another Graveyard Trespasser, then we're quite close to stabilizing, as it turns out.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I caught a glimpse of his hand a few turns ago where there was an Archfiend. I don't know if he's picked up a Shieldred since then. I would imagine you'd probably prefer, if you had both, you'd probably play the Shieldred first just to gain the life. But yeah, I think we are going to be playing a 4-drop here. And if it's Archfiend of the Dross with Reflection, I mean, we talked about Dykman being at 5. He can turn the corner pretty quickly. That would be an attack for 12 if he has any sort of fall. But we're going to go with Shieldred first. And the nice thing about Shieldred too is it also kind of cuts off a lot of Theo's outs, because a lot of Theo's outs are just cantrip, or a lot of Theo's good turns, not outs, but good plays are just cantrip into cantrip into cantrip, and don't really want to do that against an active Shieldred.
Yeah, for now, Theo has some life to work with. He can cast a Consider, he can cast something else, but that window is going to close very quickly, especially with the other 4-drop in Archfiend joining the party here now as well. So this might be the last real turn for Theo to make something happen before those 4-drops will take over the game.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of crazy. I gotta be honest with you, Dom. I did not think we'd be in this position when we looked at the board maybe 4 or 5 turns ago. Dykman was missing his third land drop for a couple of turns, but I mean, here we are. Theo bricked off a couple of turns. Dykman was able to somehow deal with both Fable the Mirror Breakers, and it seems like we're well more than stabilized. I would honestly say at this point that I dare to say, does Dykman a favorite this game?
Yeah, it's a classic case of mana screw versus mana flood, right? Where your opponent misses that third land drop. There's a sense of relief, like you sense the blood in the water. But if you can't close the deal, as soon as they hit that land, the hits are going to keep on coming. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. Dykman was able to cast his spells, and his spells were real good, as it turns out.
Yeah. Now Theo was able to kind of put a couple of cards in the graveyard. So, yeah, I was gonna say Treasure Cruise is a good card, but you would have to pay 6 life for the Shieldred. Kind of have to at this point against you can't just let the Shieldred stay there. You probably would have to cast the Cruise. Looks like Dykman's lining up a single mana here. Maybe think about firing off a removal spell. Could be a Thoughtseize, maybe a Duress. And I mean, at what point, if you're Dykman, at what point do you start turning the creature sideways? Like you can maybe say attack with the Archfiend, and then Shield Run on blocks the 2/2, you take 3. This might be the turn we actually start attacking.
Yeah, the Archfiend does give Steven an incentive to actually get the game over with too. You don't want to lose to that thing ticking down. So I think he needs to start attacking fairly soon, and I think he gets to start attacking soon as well. So both incentives leading him in the same direction there. Yeah, going to have Thoughtseize. Just checking the coast is clear, losing 2 in the process, but we'll be getting that back soon. Shoulder are going to keep doing some good work here, and yeah, the answer is right now. Both 4-drops rumbling in, and yeah, this is a formidable clock by itself. Even if Theo Trump blocks, and he's going to lose 2 on the way out from the Archfiend trigger, so taking a big chunk of damage here, effectively lethal on the board next turn, and this is going to have to be one hell of a turn for Theo, and basically not going to do it.
Yeah, with Theo at 6, you could, even if you chump block both, you take 4, and then the Shielder trigger kills you. So that is going to be Steven Dykman winning the match 2-0 over Theo Jang. I got to be honest with you,
Coming
Dom.
back
I
to the
really
booth.
did not think that we would be in that position. It looked like Dykman was so far behind the entire time, but was able to claw back out of that mana screw. And congrats to Steven.
And we'll have a time shifted game.
Yeah, and you play enough games like that where you miss your third land drop and it feels like you're far behind, but you just win some amount of those, and you know what has to happen, right? It's almost like the stakes are very clear. Just okay, well, I got to hit my third land, and I got to set myself up so that if I do, I can capitalize on that. And yeah, sure enough, Steven hit just in time, and then everything just kind of cascaded from there. So a clash of the titans here in round 1 between, I think, 2 of the favorites in the field, and the power rankings mostly would agree with that. Dykman looking to continue the amazing hot streak he's been on this year after a good start here at 1-0. We're going to see if we can get you a backup feature match for this round 1 as well. Some more good matches here in the field, and we will throw you down to one of those, I believe, in just a second here.
And Dom, as you mentioned in the intro, we got Kyle Gonzalez on Quintorius Combo and Chris Smith on Gruul Ramp. I mean, if you didn't expect either of these decks to show up, do you really even play Pioneer?
Yeah, I mentioned Rakdos versus Phoenix. Like that's a quintessential Pioneer matchup. This is not a quintessential Pioneer matchup. This is the thing that you see at FNM when people are just trying to have a good time. But these 2 players, both mainstays of the NRG series at this point, they have put their faith in these decks for this high-stakes tournament. So that's a statement in itself. Quintorius Combo, something of a known quantity at this stage. Like this was the talk of the town for a hot minute. Lots of debate still over exactly how you want to build that deck. But over here on the left, from Chris Smith, you see Gruul Ramp, and sometimes you think, well, oh, that's just how the deck was labeled in Melee or something else. But actually, it's a different archetype. No, this is Gruul Ramp. This is a Chris Smith creation, which I'm not sure how else you're even meant to categorize it.
Yeah, this is not Bobby Fortinelli, Mono Green Devotion, Splash Fable, the Mirror Breaker. This is a bunch of Eldrazi's. We have World Breakers, Vorinclexes, Emrakul the Promised End, Dragon Lord Atarka. Yeah, I mean, this deck is an absolute banger. We were talking about this in the intro. I think this deck is reasonably well set up in this metagame of, blue white control and Rakdos, but I don't really think the Gruul ramp deck wants to play against Quintorius combo, which is just, turn 5, you're dead, and there's a Quintorius, and I believe turn 5, Chris Smith might be dead.
Yeah,
Turn
turn
4, yeah.
4 even, right? We had the ramp off the creative outburst. Yeah, this is the nightmare matchup for Chris Smith. It's
Going
Lotus
back to the
Field, it's
booth.
those kind of linear combo decks, and the Christmas deck. I don't know if it does what it's meant to do, but I at least see what the idea is. And I look at this deck and I think, okay, against Rakdos, against Phoenix, against Blue White, I see how you talk yourself into this, but the gamble you're making is, dear God, I hope no one registers something like Quintorius combo. And if anyone in the room is going to do it other than Chris Smith, I think it's Kyle Gonzalez. And sure enough, that's what happened. So I think Kyle licking his chops at this pairing, winning a very quick game on here. Hopefully we get to see game 2 or maybe even game 3, but it would not shock me if this is a 2-game occasion here.
Yeah, I don't know if we. I was gonna say we could take a look at the sideboards here and see what both players have, because Chris Smith is gonna need some help in the sideboard. Now, do we have help? We have a couple of Stone Brains and a couple of Damping Spheres. I don't really see much else here, Dom.
Yeah, those are a very good start. The Quintorius deck does have 2 ways effectively to combo off with the Quintorius and with the Carnosaur, but maybe hitting one of the clone effects, like a Spark Double, means that chain can't actually be as deep as it would need to be to convert that into lethal. So Stonebrain's still going to be a very good tool, and you get to see just Christmas deck in all of its glory here. Just feast your eyes on the main deck, let alone the sideboard. But beyond that, you've got the Stonebrains. The Damping Sphere, it works to a point, but given enough time, the Quintorius deck can just, let's say you have Quintorius, and then next turn, you downtick it, you start cascading, where you can just pay for several taxes off the Damping Sphere and actually still move ahead that way. So we've got some good tools, and if you get to the point where you can cast Emrakul or something, then obviously all bets are off. Weathered Runestone, stopping players casting spells from graveyards or libraries. There's always some weird like edge cases where you think it hits something, but it doesn't hit something. Either way, Chris Smith has some good sideboard cards, but he really needs good sideboard cards early and often. And this might be a case where you just have to hard mulligan to one of those to have a chance in the game here.
Right, exactly. And now if we could take a look at Kyle Gonzalez's list and sideboard, what do we have here from Kyle's side of things? Is he prepared for the Gruul Eldrazi Menace? A couple of counter spells, Mirror Shell Crab and or Consign to Oblivion. Thought Distortion, not that great against Chris's setup because most of the payoffs are in the form of creatures, so probably doesn't want to bring in that. Consigned to be able to bounce those problematic permanent cards like Damping Sphere. That could be something that's coming in, but I mean, past the consigns, I don't see a lot here.
Yeah, we won the consigns and we won the crabs. And one thing that's interesting about the crab is that channel ability also counters activated abilities or triggered abilities. So your opponent plays a Stone Brain. Maybe you can't counter that, but the next turn they go for the activation. Maybe you can counter the activation, and now you've hit their cyber card. They spent 2 turns on it, and you bought yourself all the time in the world. So not no great cyber cards the way that Chris's are against Kyle, but still some good kind of counterplay to those hate pieces, if you like.
Absolutely. And we see if we are going to be able to get game number 2 here for you in just a moment. That game 1 was fast. We'll see if this one is just as fast. Chris Smith does get to be on the play here. Likely going to be mulliganing very, very aggressively towards those sideboard cards. I see Chris Smith putting a card back, and I believe Kyle is as well. So both players on 6. I mean, as far as the matchup is concerned, you would have to, I would have to favor Kyle. I mean, like I said, Chris Smith did get a couple of good sideboard cards, but Kyle does have a requisite answers, and just I think overall, just is just a huge favorite in this matchup.
Yeah, and Kyle's build of this deck too has this this trick that we saw in the Appraiser versions as well, where you have the the Treasure Makers, the Creative Outburst, and the Magma Opus, along with Torrential Gearhulk. And that is the perfect backup plan against Hate Like the Stone Brain, where, okay, you've hit my Cascade Chain, that passed off limits. Well, all right, I'm going to Gearhulk, Flashback, and Magma Opus a turn ahead of schedule, deal you 9, make a 4/4, tap your permanents, draw 2 cards. Like that's still going to get him across the finish line most of the time.
Exactly. So we see a ramp spell here for Chris Smith in the form of Sylvan Caryatid, and then we'll see if Kyle also has a ramp spell in the form of one of those treasure makers. That Gearhulk plan is, very, 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 very good because, like you said, it's able to kind of plow through those. And we see a turn 3 Stonebrain activation. Wonder what we're going to name here. I mean, I would assume we name Quintorius. Never mind, just kidding. And there is a copy of Quintorius in Kyle's hand. But you notice the Torrential Gearhulk as well with the Opus in the graveyard, so it can play towards that. And it looks like,
Yeah, keen to see what Chris Smith did actually name. So there is that choice of, do you name a combo piece? Do you name one of the clone effects, like the Spark Double, the Clever Impersonator? And yeah, it looks like the Spark Double is being removed from the deck here. But even without the combo potential, Quintorius itself is just a fine, continuous clock given enough time. And if Chris maybe mulliganed for a hate card, now he's played the hate card, he's spent a card and spent some time doing that, might just not have all that much left in the tank here.
right, exactly. Quintorius can +1 to make a 3/2, and then I gotta pull it up to remember what the -6 does. Exile any number of target cards from your graveyard, add a red for each card exiled this turn. Then you can play those. So that ultimate's probably not very good for Kyle. Only going to likely have 1 or 2 spells, maybe an Opus and a Creative Outburst. But yeah, just being able to make a 3/2 every turn, that can kind of pair well with the Gearhulk beatdown plan. I mean, if Kyle draws another one of those ramp spells, whether it's a Creative Outburst or a Magma Opus, and sets up for a turn 4 Gearhulk, draw a couple cards, make a 4/4, time walk you by tapping all your lands, that might just be enough to get the job done.
Yeah, the Gearhulk Magma Opus thing, we've seen decks which are dedicated to that angle. We've seen it worked into some builds of creativity and so on in the past. But it turns out that these Discover decks have actually emerged as the more enduring home for that interaction, where you build your whole deck around it. Maybe it's not worth the squeeze, but as this thing which just folds neatly into what you want to be doing anyway, it's a really nice little backup plan.
Yep. And Chris Smith going to go ahead and play land number 5. We'll have to see if he has something like a Cavalier of Thorns to be able to keep hitting his land drops. And looks like that is it's a 5-drop, not quite Cavalier. This is Vorinclex, not, 8 mana Vorinclex or any of those things. This is just Vorinclex, period. See if we can get this one up on your screen. Just in case you don't know what Vorinclex does, this is, like I said, Pioneer All-Star. Can't imagine people not knowing what it does. But yeah, this is one of Chris's additional 5-drops here.
Yeah, but back in the Mono Green Devotion days, remember those, Devin? This was one of those cards which you got your 58 main deck slots figured out, and then those 2 flex slots, you could sometimes you could fill those in with like an extra 5-drop as a treat, and Vorinclex became one of the interesting candidates for those, in part because your 6 toughness with reach, that's the perfect combination of stats against Phoenix, and then if in these longer games, you get more mana sources, and then you can actually flip that thing fairly reliably. And in a deck like that, and especially in a deck like this, that's going to yield a pretty scary output a lot of the time as well. So Vorinclex, weirdly, never made a mark in standards, at least so far, but finding a home in these obscure Pioneer round decks instead.
Okay, so here we go. We have Kyle casting Quintorius. Now, initially I thought we were just going to start plussing, but we're actually going to go for a minus. Are we going to Clever Impersonator of Vorinclex? I don't know if Kyle has any targets for that. It doesn't just get basics, right? 2 forest cards, but I don't think Kyle has any shock
I'm doing
no shock lands.
But even the Triumphs, none of those actually have a forest type on those. I don't know if this was an eventuality that Kyle had to consider here, but yeah, it's a mostly Jeskai deck splashing Thought Distortion effectively, and no need for any green sources in there. So yeah, no trigger, but maybe just a 6/6 hoping to trade with the original 6/6
See,
instead.
Kyle just came unprepared for the Vorinclex matchup. You got to have at least two forests in your deck, to, even if you need to replace the Triomes. And we see a Cavalier of Thorns here hitting a Castle Garenbrig, milling over a couple. Is that three World Breakers? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and in these games that go long, World Breaker really is backbreaking. Attacking the opponent's resources, very hard to kill in its own right. And once again, 7 toughness and reach, pretty difficult for decks like Phoenix to actually break through. And then if they break through it, well, you just break them right back. It comes back from the graveyard, breaks their world once again. And we're kind of getting to the point now where even if Kyle can set up this Gearhulk into Opus turn, well, that just doesn't beat the board anymore. The Gearhulk won't be able to attack, the 4/4 won't be able to attack, and there are so many big things you can't even tap all of them. So it looks like Chris is actually establishing this pretty dominant position.
Yeah, I think from Chris's perspective rather, now that he knows he doesn't have to worry about the combo, he can kind of just play a bunch of threats to the board, never ever turn them sideways, and he'll eventually get to something like an Ulamog or an Emrakul to close out the game. Even if Kyle's making a 3/2 every turn and casting a Magma Opus off of a Gearhulk, Chris's deck just goes over the top of all of that as we see a Vorinclex activation. I gotta be honest with you, Dom, I don't even know what the backside does, but maybe we can get that up on your screen for the folks at home.
So it's, I want to say, okay, the grand evolution, you mill 10 and then get 2 creatures? Mill 8, maybe? I'm just going to trust Chris on this one. Reading the card will explain the card once we finally get to read it. There we go. You could put a bunch of counters on things, and then you flip it back, and it keeps doing the thing. Usually, if it gets to that final chapter, the game is over already, but it's a nice little flavor text there at the bottom.
Yep, and we do see. So the chapter 1 is mill 10. You get 2 creatures. Chapter 2 is distribute 7 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control, and then till end of turn, creatures you control gain 1. Creature fights target creature you don't control, exile it, then return it back to the battlefield. So we see a mill 10 getting back Pioneer staple, Nylea Keen-Eyed, and is that, I believe, the 4th World Breaker, just in case we needed the 4th one, Dom. And yeah, I mean, like I said, Chris is just going to put a bunch of stuff onto the battlefield. We get to distribute some counters next turn, maybe on some trample creatures. Yeah, like I said, as long as Chris doesn't have to worry about the combo, he can just play. He can just do this for as long as he wants.
Yeah, we've got enough green devotion here. This is still a green devotion deck, despite recent developments.
Yeah, where's the Nykthoses in Chris's deck? Maybe he should have brought those to the table. Nykthos is also a land that turns on a World Breaker, right? You need colorless mana
Yeah,
for
I mean,
that.
we have seen people try to. Sure. Sure. We have seen people try to reboot the Green Devotion deck with cards like Sunken Citadel, Castle Garenbrig, and maybe it turns out at that point you just don't even need to do the Devotion thing. You just kind of kick it old school like Chris is doing here.
Absolutely. Castle Garenbrig does a good Nykthos impression. It basically adds 2 mana to the mana pool. Sunken Citadel to turn on Castle. That's kind of one thing we didn't go over when talking about Chris's deck list. There are 4 copies of Sunken Citadel and 4 copies of Castle Garenbrig, really utilizing that engine where if you squint hard enough, both of these lands are kind of like Ancient Tombs, where Sunken Citadel taps for 2, which goes into Castle, which makes it additional mana. So if you have an opening hand that has a Castle and a Citadel, you can get the 6 mana on turn 4 without any other trouble. Sometimes on turn 3 with a Caryatid. So it just really gives you a lot of explosiveness with what your deck can actually do. And I've seen some people work on various devotion decks with both of those cards, and they definitely seems like there's maybe something there.
Yeah, Sunken Citadel is a card that clearly is brimming with potential, but it takes a while to figure out how to actually unlock that. And that's the best kind of card, I think. You actually got to put the work in, put the hours in, and maybe some failed experiments first, but then you you refine it around the edges, and you end up with a finished product that maybe does actually work. And we'll see what level of development there Chris's deck actually is. This game, at least, is putting on an impressive performance.
Absolutely. We got, some more 3/2s. I got to be honest with you, Dom. I don't think I've ever seen that token on the battlefield, mostly because every single time Quintorius has been cast, either against me or if I've cast it, the game just ends on the spot. So I've never, that's a nice token. I've never seen that one before. We see, we got a counter on the Sylvan Caryatid. Let's go, just in case that thing, maybe we can make it lose defender somehow. Not sure whose turn. I believe it's Chris's turn. We're kind of thinking about doing some stuff here, mathing out. Yeah, Chris doesn't really need to do a lot here. I mean, we can pick up a World Breaker. We can recast one from the. I assume we have enough mana to recast a World Breaker, and I think that might be what Chris is going towards. Can start going after some of those lands, I guess. So, Chris is really thinking about like, how do I lose this game at this point? I'm not sure there is a way he can lose this game, but he's definitely thinking about it.
Yeah, I think the answer is if Quintorius triggers start adding up, where you're getting drained for 2 each time something triggers that, and then maybe Magma Opus is dealing damage. If Kyle is able to Gearhulk back 1 and then has the resources to Gearhulk back another 1 or whatever. So if this damage is going to add up over time, at least in Chris's main deck, and I assume still in a matchup like this, not really any sources of life gain. So that's the thing that stands out to me is if I get punked out, this is going to be the way. And so Chris is going to try and minimize the odds of that happening and try and constrict the resources, like with World Breaker, as much as possible, just to cut those outs off.
Well, now I'm looking at the board here. So there are conveniently 4 blockers for Chris Smith, and Magma Opus taps 2 of them. So we can tap 2. We can't kill any of them because they all have too much toughness for the damage on Opus. We can go upstairs with the damage. Make an additional 4/4. It's a 6/6 with 2 blockers. You block the Gearhulk in the 6/6. That's 10 damage coming through. I mean, this is maybe a bit more damage than Chris wanted to take.
Well, let's see if Kyle has another Gearhulk for the other Opus that's in there, tapping down the 2 remaining blockers. At that point, he can hit with everything.
Oh,
and yeah, we're gonna copy the Gearhulk.
Wow.
Get back the Opus, and then yeah, that's it. Okay, well, yeah, tapping that Sylvan Caryatid may end up being a lethal mistake there. Yeah. So
I mean,
that's often you can stabilize against the first Gearhulk into Opus, but it's the second one that gets you, as they always say.
Yeah, we were just looking. We were just talking about as if the game was over the entire time, and Kyle's like, "Don't worry, guys, I got this." And yeah, Kyle just able to chain back-to-back Magma Opuses to close out that game, and a game that we didn't really think that there was any hope for Kyle. So, yeah, that was really, really impressive from Kyle being able to, still win a game after his combo piece got Stone Brain. So that was very, very impressive. Maybe not something that he had anticipated, but well done to Kyle. As far as
I mean, that's what we flagged up at the start with the whole Gearhulk angle, right? Is that, yeah, you can lose your combo effectively, but this is a good, fair plan. And especially if you get to do the thing twice in quick succession, and both of those are playing into each other, then, yeah, if your opponent gives you that much time, then you can stitch it together, and you're seeing the payoff for the way Kyle built his.
Absolutely. And I don't know if we could take a look at the if we could take a look at, I believe we want to take a look at the upcoming events that we have for this year, because, like I said, we have the best of the best from all of 2023. But if you want to try and get into this event next year, maybe go out to one of the NRG events and try to win one of these events to be able to qualify. Here is the first event we have of the year in Chicagoland. It's going to be on February 17th. Saturday, we have a 10K Pioneer Showdown. That's where you can book your spot for 2024 champs. And Sunday, a 5K Standard Showdown. So be sure to join us February 17th and the 18th in Chicagoland for some Pioneer and some Standard action. And then we also have a couple of events lined up here for you. We have April 20th. April 20th to the 21st in Minneapolis. That's Saturday is 10K Modern, and then Sunday is 5K Legacy. May 11th and the 12th in Indianapolis, we have Saturday 10K Modern, and then Sunday 10K Team Trios. Gotta love those team events. And then June 22nd and 23rd in St. Louis, we have Saturday 10K Pioneer and Sunday 5K Modern. So that is going to be the events that we have upcoming for this year. And I mean, I gotta say, Dom, as far as that first round is concerned, that's about everything we could have ever hoped for. Like you said, that first match we had with Theo and Dykman, two of our best players, two of our most favorite players, just an incredible matchup. And then we get to see two amazing decks from Kyle and Chris. Just all around an amazing round one to kick off this champs weekend.